Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing fine. Doing fine.
Absolutely wonderful. So, may I ask you please to tell us your name and share with us anything you feel comfortable so we can get to know you a little bit better, please?
Yeah, happy to do so. My name is Keith McIntosh. I am the Vice President for IT at the University of Richmond. Been here since 2016. I've been in higher ed for about since 2008, so 12 years now. And prior to that, I spent 24 and a half years serving our country in the United States Air Force. I am married, divorced, and remarried. My first wife was a Black woman from Chicago, and my current wife is a white woman from Iowa. We have a rainbow coalition of a family. She had a son prior to us getting together, and I had a son, and then we had a daughter together. So I have a 6'5", blonde-haired, blue-eyed son. She has a 5'9" African-American son, and we have a Latina-looking daughter.
How old are your children?
Oh, that's a great question. My boys are 1987. I got to get the math right. 1987, 33 years old. And my daughter is 26, going on 27.
Okay, very good. And I'm going to come back to the reason why I asked you that question. So, from the military, why did you choose IT as a career?
Well, IT chose me, Rochelle, if I'm being honest, right?
Okay.
I was one of those. So I'll be honest with you. I don't mind sharing a story. I was a decent kid growing up in high school. I was in advanced courses, but I lacked direction about what I wanted to do. And so after high school, all my buddies went off to college, so I did too. But unlike them, I didn't have the discipline to stay going to classes and sticking to the book. So I bounced around a little bit till my dad said, guess what, young man, this is getting a little bit too old. You're coming down to talk to the recruiter. So I enlisted in the Air Force, and then I joined the Air Force, and I was very fortunate the Air Force put me in. At the time in the early 80s, Rochelle, it was communications, which converted to IT. It was a great fit for me. So that's kind of like divine intervention right there. And I excelled at IT. I loved IT. And so I've been in IT since 1983 and loved every minute of it.
Absolutely. That's absolutely wonderful. And what are the challenges you face in IT as a Black man?
Well, so this is interesting. It goes from something as mild as, oh, you work in IT, and that's very subtle, like I can't work in IT.
Right.
To being a leader, I think it's rare. I know it was really rare when I came into higher education in 2008. I was looking for folks like me who were in higher ed IT leadership, and I didn't find many, right? At the highest levels. Now, I'm pleased to say that there are more, and many of them are my friends, but I think we can do better. And so the challenges are often trying to, I think, the same hustle that we always have to do. I tell folks oftentimes, and I've told my children this, that you're going to have to hustle 2 to 3 times harder just to be seen as equal. And I think they're, for me personally, I'm not going to complain, but I think that is the lot that I've been dealt, the deck that I've been dealt, right? That I have to hustle harder. I always have to mind my P's and Q's a little bit more to make sure folks really believe that I know what I'm doing and I am on top of what I should be on top of. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And so as an IT, say the title again, just to make sure I get it correct.
I'm the Vice President for Information Services, and my role is Chief Information Officer, or CIO.
Okay. So as the CIO, are your plans, policies, and practices questioned as a Black man, or is it because you have a staff and a team that they fall in line with what you say they should do? Or do you find times where you've come up with a process or policy or practice and people question the legitimacy or the soundness of that practice?
Well, I think that depends. I'm going to start here and work my way back. I've been fortunate to be CIO at 3 institutions. And so starting with the current institution, I think every time you come into some place, one of the first things Rochelle, I think you have to do is build trust and relationships, right? I think you're going to get questioned regardless of who you are as a leader until people get to know you and understand where you're coming from. I won't say that I've experienced it so much from a race perspective, but just maybe more from a new guy perspective. There are definitely times when folks are maybe giving me a side eye about that, and you can't call it out, but you kind of feel it and know it, that you're questioning, are you questioning my perspective because I'm not accomplished as a professional? Because I am. or are you questioning that because you don't think I am capable because of my skin color, right? And it's hard to discern which. Nobody's ever been outward that much to me about these types of things, Rochelle, but there are times I can recall, and I don't want to share too much with different people out there, but there are times where you know that folks are calling things into question or you're challenged, right? My last institution, I distinctly remember that there was a inquisitiveness that went a little too long in my mind about what I was presenting as a strategy and approach to solve a problem. Mm-hmm. And I finally, for me, it was just enough is enough. And I don't get it. I'm very patient. I'm very tolerant. But I got to a point where I said, it could have been a career changing event, but I said to the president and some of the other leaders, I said, look, you hired me to be your chief information officer. And I am putting my whole career and everything behind what I'm sharing with you. Either you accept what I say and believe it, or you don't. I am no longer going to try to convince you. You can ask me 50 questions 10 times over, but I've answered all your questions. And that was one time that I was like, what gives? Why is that happening? Right? And then I can't conclude anything, Rochelle, but I often wonder, would you do this with somebody else?
Right. And that's my experience too. I want to tell you a little bit about me. I know you know a little bit about me, but I want to tell you. So I've been in IT since 1977. I had gotten a full math scholarship to a college in New York. I was walking onto the campus, matriculating my way to the wherever you're supposed to go when you first get there. And there was a white man standing outside, in the things that we recognize as kiosks now, but he had a table and he had a bunch of literature and pamphlets on the table. And he says to me, hey, and so growing up in the South, white people did not speak to you, especially in a way that was not threatening, for lack of a better word. And he said, hey, and I looked back at him and I kept walking. And he said, ma'am. And then that kind of got me because, this is a white man saying this to a black woman, ma'am. So I turned around and I walked back to his table and he said, we are trying to bring Negroes into computing. Now, this is the late 70s. My experience growing up in the South, Negroes was a whole nother word. Mm-hmm. And then computing, I had never heard of it, never. Mm-hmm. And through my high school years and everything, people kept telling me all I should do is get pregnant and get married and, go on about my life. I was not smart enough to do any of these other things, although mathematically, especially in geometry and statistics, I was brilliant. But algebra and trigonometry and calculus, none of that stuff. So I don't want anybody confused about that. I'm not a math wizard, but there were certain areas of math that I was really good at. And so when he explained to me what computers were, he showed me some pictures of these massive computers, mainframe computers. They were these huge things. And he said, we have a role for, bringing in a certain number of blacks. And I later come to learn that was because the federal government had required them to do so. It wasn't that they had done it because they were being magnanimous or anything like that. It was just what they were doing. So, and I'm sitting there listening and I'm thinking, do I really want to do this? This does not look like fun because the equipment was so big and I was so little. So I was sitting there thinking, nah, I don't want to do this. His next statement was, and we will pay you $30,000 a year. I am 17 years old, $30,000. Those two numbers, smack, damn it. Bye, college. See you. It was nice coming over here. I'm going this way. And that's how I got started. And so I've been in IT for 40 plus years. And I want to make a parallel to your career. So from the military to IT, it chose you. I guess it chose me too in a way. Mm-hmm. But the highest I have ever been is a senior IT director. I don't have a military background. Mm-hmm. My accomplishments could fill a room of the things that I have done. Projects, budgeting, hiring, all the things that I have done, and I have not achieved any more than that. And I have a massive network of black, white, yellow, orange, every kind of person you can imagine. They're all advocates, right? They all speak up for me, write letters of recommendation, suggest this or whatever it is. But when it comes to actual putting forth my foot into maybe a CIO, a CTO, an assistant CIO. None of those things have been available to me. And the reason why I tell you this story is if you listen to my chats, you will hear this story repeated by Black and brown women over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Because unlike what you just said, where you're putting it all on the table, you believe what I'm telling you, you trust what I'm telling you, or you don't. As a Black woman, that would be considered aggressive or threatening to say that, right? So when so the work that I do, I am responsible for infrastructure, the user support, and project management. So those are the three bailiwicks that I manage, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have no project has never come in over time. In other words, we were within the deadline, never over budget.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect, documented, trained, and everything. Infrastructure, security, the equipment, everything about it on point. The piece of trying to make sure we hire a diverse staff and we manage all the projects that we have. I've never had a negative PEP, a performance evaluation. I've never been fired, nothing. Constantly recommended. People call me all the time. So I'm a consultant. People call me from all over the world. Come do this one thing for me. Come do this one project for me. And I always wonder, and I ask a lot of the Black women and brown women that I know, why is it that we are not CIOs? Why are we not CTOs? Why are we not COOs in our field when we have years of experience? Now, one of the digs that might be, I have 3 degrees from a historically Black college, and I have a doctorate degree from a white college. None of my education is in IT, because when I started out, and you probably know this still today, IT is cut and paste, right? So what if you wrote a line of COBOL code, the next line was just a modification. It wasn't like you needed to, take a class in programming or you need to take a class in networking, because almost all of it falls on top of something else. And so since I had started out in the very beginning, there was no reason to have an IT degree. So what I got an English degree, a literature degree, so I could write and speak intelligently. I got a psychology degree so I could understand people and all that stuff. I got a master's in administration so I could understand how companies and businesses work. And I got a doctorate degree in education because I love education and I wanted to stay in the education field. So that might be a reason. That might be, a check against me. Why not? But what you have said here today is phenomenal. I will ask you one question. You're familiar with EDUCAUSE, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You know Mike Cato?
Oh, personal friend of mine.
Right. CLAC, 3 or 5 Black CIOs in the entire CLAC. And what CLAC is 73 or 173, I don't remember what the total number of CLAC is, but that predominantly white. Right. 12 out of almost 600 predominantly white universities, 12 CIOs. Brown more than Black, meaning Indian, Asian, they're Black, white women, but not. And so your experience, just this chat right here, will mean a lot to a lot of people to hear this, that it is possible, that there is a window. More times than not, the window is closed for some of us, but there is a window. And I would just ask you that as you are doing your work, go to the high schools, the colleges, show your face and share your experience. Because most of us, and I can speak for my university, do not find people that look like us and give us anything to aspire to, right? So there isn't a CIO, a Black CIO they can go and talk to. They can go work for Google or whoever it is and do an internship. But then when that's done, what's next? So my request to you is reach back and bring people along with you and help them figure out how to get to where you are, because it's hard. It is really, really, really hard. And not having your leadership question is exceptional. It's absolutely exceptional that you can go in and you're going to say, today we're going to do X, and everybody marches in line and does X. Your results are exceptional. So just exceptional. So I just wanted to get that out there so you knew that what you are and who you are is an exceptional example of what's possible for Black and brown people. And they need to see more of you. You know, they need to hear your story. They need to see more of you. So I just wanted to get that out there.
So you know what? So first off, Rochelle, I want to say thank you for that compliment. I appreciate that. And those are definitely words I'm going to live by. I think I have, but you've kind of lit a fire to kind of take it to a whole other level. I have to comment about your comment first. You know, I listened to what I mean, I know of you. Michael Cato spoke very highly of you, and I think highly of Michael Cato. So anybody that Michael Cato puts a halo over, I'm going to say they're good with me. I think about what you just described with your experiences, and I just go, you know, based on what you told me, you're more qualified to be CIO than I am, right? And so I wonder, and so that bugs the heck out of me, to tell you the truth, right? And I've been talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion since I was in my last 10, 15 years in the military when I was a senior leader, and definitely in higher ed. I think I'm in a privileged position right now. And I'm very fortunate to serve both on the EDUCAUSE board and then the CUBO board. And you know, thinking about how my mom and dad raised me, at this level and platform, if I'm not doing things and advocating for people to try to make it the load lighter or make the road smoother, the road more flat for those coming behind me, I really am not doing what I should be doing. And throughout my career, and now more than ever, I think, you know, given what's going on in the world, I've always been about education and awareness. But I've been really putting advocacy and anti-racism in the conversation and saying we need more people to do that. Now, I will say I've been a benefactor of having some extremely fantastic mentors, mostly white,
Me too.
who have helped me navigate and actually been kind of a sponsor for me, right? So I think there's a hustle that we have to do as Black people in the world. Our work has to be impeccable and exceptional, but we also need to have that possibility of people are going to pick up and amplify our work and speak on our behalf. It's problematic that we have people, especially women, qualified like yourself, who could be leading organizations but don't. And so I always have to say, well, why? So one of the things we have to do is raise back, look at this, and kind of evaluate it. What are the demographics are, you know, and so I've been very fortunate to be involved with CUPA HR, the College University Professional Association for HR, and they have put out metrics and reports about this. I think the number was like 21% are leaders in IT are women, and of that demographic, it's going to be even less for women of color. And so you have to ask that question.
Men of color.
And Black men of color, right? So one of the things we have to do is kind of look at the whole pipeline, I think. We need to kind of look at, as you just so eloquently said, we need to reach back and try to inspire young people to at least know that this is a possibility. So I'm reminded of, like, when I was in my first higher education institution, I was in Tucson, Arizona. And I was very fortunate to be involved with kind of this Black men group. These were doctors and lawyers and other senior business leaders, and I was part of it. And what we used to do is go in some of the inner city schools in Tucson and talk to them. One is just, you know, one, we got to build up a relationship with them, but two, just for what you said. And I would say, look, because of the job I have, I try to speak to things that might appeal to them. Right. This is what this job has enabled me to be able to do. I can have a nice home. I can have a nice car. I can wear nice clothes. I can travel. I can go do things. But none of those would have not happened if I would not have had this job. But this job is fantastic. Let me tell you why the job is fantastic. And let me tell you why I think it's going to be fantastic for the next 50 to 100 years, because we're advancing in technology. Why not be on this and catch this wave so your market opportunity is vast? And I tell them our career field is from soup to nuts. You can go from security to administration to database to customer service to programming and everything in between. And the opportunity for growth is there as well, but you got to get in the game and get started. The other thing I think we need to do is put more structures in place to help grow and advance people of color, especially women, right? I'm really proud of the fact that, you know, I hired a Black female CISO here at the University of Richmond, right? That is, you know, when Michael and I first met, we used to say when we became CIOs, we were kind of a unicorn because there wasn't that many of us, right? And I think more of a unicorn is seeing a Black woman in our role, right? Why is that? And I'm trying to push for one day where that is no longer the norm. I think we're no longer talking about it. We just start seeing more Black women, and we have to advance. But this is a couple of things. So there's a conversation to people of color, women of color. What we really need to talk to them about what they need to do to navigate to get there and educate them on that. But I also think we need to have conversations with our colleagues on our campuses, including the leadership team who's going to be hiring, to get them to see the world differently, right? Because I think it's a combination of what you bring and what they see or what their beliefs are that have to be modified and changed. And I think then we can get to the other side. So I'm trying to advocate. I mentor at least 3 to 5 people a year. I'm in a low period right now, but one of the ladies is a Latina, and we had some really great conversations. And I know she's going to rock it one day. And she also had Michael as a mentor as well, right? So it's going to help her advance, right? So those are little things we have to do. But I'd like to see more white men and white women who, because I have the majority, they're in the position of influence, think differently and start doing the same thing, right? Does that make sense?
It does. I will just say to one thing you just said about, helping Black women understand what they need to do. We start out at a place where, I'll give you an example. I have a very dear friend works with me. Brilliant. Her area of expertise, she's a project manager. She, again, on time, on the budget, massive projects. She's done tons of things.
Mm-hmm.
The problem for us is not necessarily knowing what to do. It's being seen as something other than, one, the angry Black woman,
mm-hmm.
the promiscuous Black woman,
mm-hmm.
the mouthy Black woman, all of these things that get attached to us and then limit us. And I would say for myself, I am the mouthy Black woman. You aren't going to just talk to me any kind of way. You aren't going to just treat me any kind of way. I'm old. I've been in this game for a long time. So you're just not going to talk to me any kind of way. And I recognize that can be harmful for me. But one of the things that I did for my people that I mentor, and mentor is not my word, advocate. I advocate for the people I advocate. I created a group called Text and Collab, and it encompasses the entire university, not just the School of Business, the School of Law, the School of Medicine, the entire university, because each one has their own IT group. And we brought all these people together, Black, white, brown, female, male, gay, everything you can imagine. We brought them all together. We meet once a month for lunch. And we talk about the challenges, i.e. the wicked problems that we experience in our day-to-day job, but we also talk about diversity. Like, will you pick up the phone, write a letter, or find your friend and say, hire person X? And and specifically for white, male, and female, I ask them all the time. And I'm sure you're going to advocate for your next door neighbor or whoever it is. But what I want you to do is pick up the phone and advocate for a Black person that you know. It's not like you just discovered this person yesterday and you don't have any history and you don't want to expend that social capital on that person because you don't know how successful they are going to be. But someone you know and say, hey, let me help this person move to the next level. Now, you know this probably as well as I do. IT is almost flat, right? So you've got your CIO, you've got all these, but then you've got a massive amount of analysts or whatever you call them. You've got these support people, and then you've got these other kind of people who do kind of more menial things like maybe data entry, correcting code, grant writing, whatever it is that they're doing. Because that middle is so fat, the people that white females and Black white males are in that middle. So they don't have the power to call, company X and say, hey, I work with this wonderful Black woman who I think would do this amazing thing for you, because they're in that fat part. It is when they get to that part where you are up at the top, when you become a part of the leadership, that you need to do that. So what I try to do is train them as they grow, because they will be promoted and paid and all that stuff. Whereas Black and brown women will be less of that when you reach that leadership level, do that. And the other thing that I instituted is hiring, right? So if you're hiring a president or a vice president or a CIO, whatever it is, everybody in the room is of that ilk, right? They've got years of experience. They're this. Hiring needs to be restructured. So hiring needs to be the hiring manager, whoever that is. You need to have people who know what this job's role will be, but you also need to have the person who is brand new to your company. The first month, first week, whatever, in your company. Because what he or she brings is what you have forgotten, right? So when you first started out in IT, the things that you've forgotten, you're not going to think about this anymore. But that guy or girl who is brand new is going to bring you a different view that will help you think about hiring different. So in other words, especially, when they think about, things, say, okay, so this person is going to be our CIO and they're going to need to, create these teams and stuff like that. So that new person can tell you what his or her struggles and success has been to get there. Then you need to bring the person from your finance department. You need to bring the person from that this person may support, so a department that they may support, all of those people in the room. And together, that collaborative group of people then discuss the credentials of each person they have interviewed and make a decision together. Not that hiring manager, because that hiring manager is going to just manage that person. That's all they're going to do, is manage them. But all those other people are going to be working with that person regularly. And so they're going to have times where they think, why didn't you think about this? And I'll give you my example. In 2015, Google released this facial recognition software. When it saw a certain hue, it produced a picture of a gorilla. And the problem with that is because everybody in the room was exactly alike. I don't think Google intentionally did that. That's bad business practice. So I don't think they did that. But the problem is when you put uniformity, and back in my day, we used to call that groupthink. When you put all the people in the room who think alike, you get the same result. So these are the kind of things that I have been trying to do. So you said I've been working in diversity now for 30 plus years. I mentor about 100 or so women and men, of color. I speak in many, many places about diversity. I formed a company that deals with diversity, helping organizations understand how to have those uncomfortable conversations, hire, correctly, and to think about, these terms that we keep. So we've got a new term now, it's called belonging. So we had DEI and now we got belonging. So, right. So these companies who are not focusing on that, these words are just words, right? So when we talk about diversity, people think we're talking about Black or brown people. That's not what diversity means to me. Diversity of persons, diversity of ideas, diversity of thoughts, and diversity of action. That's what diversity means to me. So my company does that. But as you, as a CIO, think about this, I think that it's very important to understand there are sometimes things we can do nothing to help ourselves get to that level where we need to be, where we are hired or recognized, because we're stereotyped, marginalized, muted, voiceless. I don't know if you know Kathy Hubbs. Kathy Hubbs is the CISO of American. She came and talked to us a few years ago, and she introduced a term to us, he-peat. Now, when I first said, I said, this woman must not know what she said. I actually said, you mean repeat? She said, no, he-peat. And she said it is when you're in a room, and she's a white woman, you're in a room and you're talking and you suggest an idea or something to do, and it's crickets. But the minute a male colleague rephrases it or add another term to it, oh my God, this is the greatest thing we've ever thought of. This is better than sliced bread. We need to do this. So, and if you just using Kathy as an example, who is a CISO, successful, been doing this for a while, powerful woman, can't get her voice. Imagine what it's like for Black and brown people who are doing the best they can, doing more than they should, that don't have a voice. So I would just add that to your piece about, helping people understand what they need to do to get there, because they may be already doing it, but then people aren't recognizing it.
Well, absolutely. And this is one of the cool things about dialogue. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking, first off, going back to the beginning, I'm a big fan of the whole recruitment process, right? And I've written some papers about this for Educall's Review about diversity, equity, inclusion, and talking about the whole pipeline process, and really start focus on recruitment, but then focus on retention. And each of those are distinctive, they're connected, but you really need to know and understand what's happening in each phase, right? And when I've done my previous hire, I don't get that big of opportunities to hire for a direct report that often, because those positions don't change as often. But when I do, when I was just thinking about it prior to coming on this line, I was thinking about my first hire when I became a CIO was an Asian man. My second hire at my next institution was a gay white man. My next hire was a white woman, kind of had the same portfolio that you had, and I had just reorganized, and it was a team full of men, so I brought a woman from the outside to lead that group, and then I've hired a Black woman here, right? I think the way you get there is first saying, this is what I believe in as a leader. I want to make sure that we're having a diverse pool of candidates as I possibly can. So let's not go to where we normally go to try to recruit. Let's think bigger. And then I've actually said where when they showed me what they brought in, I'm like, nah, we can wait. I'll give you more time. Go get it right. Go reach out and get more people, diverse people. Because we won't have diverse candidates and diverse selections if we don't have a diverse pool, right? So we have to do that. The other thing we do is everywhere I've been, especially my last two institutions, have a sit-down conversation with our human resources and say, prior to us looking at our first resume, let's come together and understand our own biases and stereotypes. Let's make sure we focus on that first and foremost so we're not bringing those in. So I don't want you to unconsciously to have a different decision about James or Jamal, right? When Jamal is just as qualified as James, right? I don't want that to happen. So know what that is. And I love what you said, Rochelle, because I think the first thing I do when I put together the pool is not a normal pool. I have people saying, well, I don't understand why you put them on there. It doesn't matter why that's what I want, right? So I have people that can understand when I'm thinking about diversity, I'm thinking I want young, I want older, I want folks in senior leader positions, I want people in frontline positions, I want customers, and I want teammates, right? I also want people who think like this, and I want people that think like that, right? I want people that are technology enthusiasts and folks that hate technology, right? Because that's going to make for a robust discussion. And when they look at candidates, they're not going to fall into a groupthink. I can guarantee you they're not, because they're going to bring their perspectives. Right. Then what comes out in that wash is usually something much more richer. When I come in, I'm already assured that the person can do the job. I'm already assured that these folks feel like they could probably work with them while they're wherever their perspective are. And they also know that this is probably what I think I would want to have on my team. And so that's typically worked for me. We need to do more of that. I also think about advocating. When you said something that struck me as a core, my last institution, when I got there, I do something where I go, and I could do this while I have a team of 50 to 75 people, but I don't know what I'll ever do it if I ever get a team much larger than that. I like to meet with everybody individually when I first come into an institution. I usually have a group conversation. Hey, how y'all doing? This is Mac. This is what I'm about. Here's my career. Here's how I like to lead. Here's how I like to work. But then I want to sit down and meet with you individually. I also, before we do that, I fill out a bio sheet. It's something I've always started doing. It kind of gives some things about me, my personal life, my hobbies, my career. So it's a mix of personal and professional. I send it to them. I send a blank one. I say, you fill it out as well. So when it comes back, we start getting to know each other via email. And then I meet with you and we have a great dialogue. And that's when I start building the trust and building a relationship. My last institution of doing that, I had about 20% women on the team. And the women collectively said, we have a problem. They said it differently, but basically they said a problem. And what you said about heat Pete with Kathy was so perfect, because that's what was happening in our institution. They had heat Pete's, they had mansplaining.
Yes.
They had I say something and it's not heard, and then a man says it and then it's heard. I guess that's a heat Pete, right? And more importantly, my ideas, somebody else takes credit for them, right? And I was like, okay, whoa, that stops. So I'm trying to say, stop, team, gentlemen, there's a new day and a new culture. Call out the behavior that's been occurring in the past, explain what it is, why it's not good, and it will not happen anymore. And then try to work on bridging the gap from where we once were to where we need to be. And I remember we partnered with a faculty member at my institution who was in the sociology department to help us put together kind of diversity training for our team. Mm-hmm. And we took 2 men and 2 women, and we got together with that faculty member, and we had really good planning sessions. And then we set out to do a series of monthly conversations, which actually moved the needle. I'm not saying we're going to make everybody convert overnight, but we had men walk into that meeting like, I don't know why I'm here. I can't believe this diversity stuff. We're not going to do that. But once they heard the stories, right, and whether it's conscious or unconscious, once they heard the stories, what I found by the second, maybe the third, fourth, fifth session, men were no longer, crossing their arms and leaning back. They were uncrossing their arms and leaning in with concern and care, and like, oh, I didn't really know that was going on. And the other thing that we have to try to do, and I was just on a call with some folks today, we need more people to be advocates and anti-racist, right? So when they see these behaviors, they call them out. And I think when we are in a privileged position like myself in power, some of the things I do will be subtle, but folks will get it. When I know that I'm trying to kick out ideas, we're having a great conversation, and a junior female says something, I go, great idea, write it down. And then we go on, and then another gentleman says maybe 5 minutes later what that person said. I said, that is a great idea. That's the same thing that Julie just said, right? So appreciate that, Julie, for your leadership. That, if it, it's direct, but it's subtle. It lets the man know, don't come in here just trying to repeat what you just heard the woman say. She already said it, right? Those are things we could do. So those are just small, but it takes a conscious, vigilant effort, Rochelle, to get there, right? And I absolutely agree that, when you said about the angry Black woman, I'm reminded of my sisters, right? So I have a sister who is 6 years younger than me, and she's a professional in a major aerospace corporation. And when we do talk about professional and advancing, I look at it, I'm no more special than my sister, right? Grew up with her, same work ethic, same principles our parents instilled in us. And I've been fortunate to advance. And part of it is male privilege. I absolutely know it is, right? But she gets that all the time. And I think about, when I talk to my white colleagues, I said, that's a burden to have to carry around all damn day. That
all day.
All day. Now, I get it a little bit, but nothing to what a woman does. I mean, I know, and I'm going to give a talk this Thursday to our athletics division to kind of explain that to them. I don't have the luxury of really having a bad day at work. Yeah. I can't show too much frustration. And I know it's worse for our Black women. That if they assert themselves, there's a big difference between when they are asserting or, and what's really insidious about this, Rochelle, is having to assert for something that they shouldn't have to assert for in the first doggone place.
And then assertion is assumed to be aggression.
Right.
It's not assertion, but aggression. You're being aggressive. Or the converse of that, passive aggressive.
Right. Right. And so that's where what I've told people on my campus, right, and especially we don't have an employee resource group, but there are a lot of people of color to get together on a regular basis, and I go, right, and I think we're very fortunate in our institution to have a Black president. I'm a Black VP, and we have 2 Black deans. We have 5 schools, 5 deans, and 2 of the schools are Black deans, 1 Black male, 1 Black female, and I know that they can, on their schedule permits, go to those meetings, and I'm often I go there because I'm Black and I want to stay connected to that community, understand, and then take their voices and put it in my words in a way I know that'll be palatable inside of the leadership halls to share and convey that. So that's what I try to do. And that's my small way of trying to help change and shape the future. Now, I will say that the speed of change from different groups is not going to be what folks want to see, but I've seen my colleagues grow and develop because I've been able to share stories with them collectively and individually, and they get there. And now when I speak up, they kind of understand it, right? Like, hey, look, that's not going to resonate. Oh yeah, you're right, Mac. So let's work on how we're going to message that a little bit. Or wait a minute, why did we do that? Why didn't we have that group included in these conversations? Things of that nature. But it takes time, and I guess I don't want to stray too far to point. We have a problem when it comes to not having enough women in leadership, and we definitely have a problem when we don't have enough women of color in leadership. And I guess the thing I think about, Rochelle, is why the hell not? Why don't we?
I already told you. I'm angry. I'm passive aggressive. I am ridiculous. I am loud. I could listen for hours now. So I tell you. So I have a company, and our work is advocacy, diversity, and strategic IT hiring and planning. Right. Mm-hmm. And so we did a thing for a company, a medium-sized company. I think they had something like 1,000 employees. And so they wanted us to help them think about how to change the narrative of the company. In other words, the cultural bias and things that exist there, right? Mm-hmm. So I sent them a survey, 10-question survey. Just ask them just some very basic questions. And the thing that I often hear is that first, women, and this is across all races of women, are too emotional, right? We are emotionally, so like if John says something to hurt our feelings, we may cry, or we may stomp out the room, or we may become something. So we're too emotional. So that's the first thing that I learned that's mm-hmm. the problem is. Mm-hmm. The second thing is that we bring, and we all do, we bring bias to every situation we're in, right? So if you go to McDonald's versus Burger King, and of course, I hope you don't go to either one of those, but if you may prefer one or the other because of some experience you've had. So we bring bias to everything that we do. And so some of that is innately a part of who we are, and how we were raised and what people tell us, and things like that. So there's that. So you get these kind of things like, my experience with women is this. My experience with Black women is this. My experience with Latinos and Hispanic women are this, or my experience with gay people are this. And then they even go further to say my experience with millennials are this. And none of them are positive, right? So they're all, so millennials want to be paid the world, they're in the biggest office, and they're only going to be in a job for a couple of weeks, and then they're gone. So you get those kind of things like that. So as I tried to formulate this, and I've been collecting data for years about diversity and how we change this, the first thing you have to do is create a community. And you have to create a community of all, not a community of Black, of brown, but a community of all. And I think what you said about bringing these groups together, and resource groups, and I hear a lot about resource groups. I'm not a big fan of resource groups, but I'm a fan of groups of diverse people, as you described. Age, experience, race, everything that you can bring to a group. And if you can get those groups to have conversations ongoing, whether you do it virtually, whether you do it email, however you but have a conversation. So what is a microaggression? If you ask a white person what a microaggression is, you get this blank stare, right? What microaggression? So I'll tell you one that I had. So I did a diversity chat with a professor, and she said this to me. She says, I grade high, I grade above the curve for all of my students, especially the Black ones. Now, I explained to her that's a microaggression. She says to me, what is a microaggression? So I sent her the Oxford definition of what a microaggression is. And she said, it is not. It is not. I was just trying to point out to you that I am fair to all of my students. I said, so then why did you need the comma? Why couldn't you say, I grade above the curve for all of my students, period, not comma. So this work that we have to do, I think, is going to, as you said, take a while. We're not going to get there overnight, but I do think we also must create communities of diverse people, ages, thoughts, ideas, actions, and have these as ongoing conversations. So, and what I do in mine is every time we meet, I have a different person lead. So the white man may lead, the white woman may lead, the Black person may lead. And I always say there's some ground rules, right? We're not going to be disrespectful, right? We're not going to hurt anybody's feelings. We're not going to be name calling, right? All these ground rules that we need to go in here. But then when the Black, brown person leads, he or she might say, I've been at this company for 10 years and I've not been promoted. Or I know that my colleague sits across from me, my white colleague, he makes $100,000 a year and I make $65,000 a year. And so when the diverse room hears that, everybody's eyebrows go up. Like, how? How's this possible? Well, and then you've got that organization you talked about, HR, the least transparent piece of any institution. It is they got all kinds of, it's confidential, it's personnel, it's all these, they got all these kind of things they glue together to say why they can't, share and give information why the white man makes $100,000 and the Black man makes $65,000. Why is that? So both of them have the same experience, same education. They didn't go to the same universities, of course, but their career path has been almost exactly similar, but there's not that. So I think that the work that you and others like you have to do has to be such that you're asking people to tell their stories and allow the people in the room to hear those stories. They can also comment on those stories, but then to come back and give feedback on their story. So what did you hear? So, as a parent, I'm sure, but, I'll tell my child, I say, well, I want you to make sure that you clean your room today. And I'll ask him, can you repeat back to me what I said to you? And he said, you want me to make sure that my room is clean. I said, that's not what I said. So, getting that, what did you hear? What did you hear that I said, right? So those kinds of things have really moved a lot of needles for me and for companies that I've worked with, but it's work, it's hard, it's time consuming. And I will tell you, in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of all the work that we have to do to help people, faculty teach remotely, there's no time for this work right now, but it is so absolutely necessary. And I'll tell you my last Rochelle story. So I am writing a book called Gender, Poverty, Race Through the Lens of Current and Emerging Technologies. I also put together a course on that. My university and probably 10 other universities all said, this is great. We really need this. Can we let him teach it? Or can we let her teach it? Not you. Okay.
Well,
And so my answer always is no, thank you. You know, and I never send my full course. I send a consolidated little piece of course that talks about each. I never send my full course because, you know, somebody else will get to start teaching it, right? But not me. And I always wonder why. And what we hear in my university, especially from the Black and brown students, is why are there no people that look like me that are faculty? Why are there no people that look like me that are counselors? Why are there's no community for me to go to? So my study group, you know, I'm sure you read this a long time ago. Why are all the Black kids sitting together in the cafeteria? That's what their experiences is in predominantly white universities. Where in historically Black colleges, there is community, but the problem is they don't have all the resources they need to support that community.
Yeah, you made a lot of great points. I wish I'd have took some notes there. I was thinking about a couple of things. One, just kind of working backwards. You know, I've been very privileged to be a CIO, Black man, working at predominantly white institutions, both private residential liberal arts, one in New York, one here in Virginia. So I get that. And I remember a couple things. I remember when I first came here, coming here as an interracial couple, I had a lot of reservations, both my wife and I. We're coming to the seat of the Confederacy. We're thinking about Richmond. We had, you know, there's the sound bites that you might have heard or read about, like crime and stuff like that. Confederate monuments, just racism in general, the history of slavery in this state. It's just a lot. Loving versus Virginia was here, you know, and so there's just a lot that we were just trying to unpack that. We made a decision to come here and it's been pleasant. But I remember when I first came on campus and this is, it's just an observation, but it's also an indication of something that is problematic for me. I can't figure out how to solve it just yet, is that the majority of the Black people that work here work in certain career fields, right? And it's a mass majority.
They cook and clean.
Yes, ma'am. And thank you for calling it out. And when I first arrived, many came up to me like, "Oh, brother, I'm so happy to see you here. Oh, brother, I'm so happy to see you here." And I, you know, so that was a first for me, right? Because I'm just being me, being Mac, doing my job, but I didn't realize the moment being the first Black vice president here, right? And realizing, wow, okay. So there was that. I'm also thinking about, I want to share the story with you because I absolutely, truly believe what you said about cross-cultural conversations and diverse mix, right? So I'll say this in an abridged version. I actually have a video of this I can share with you later. 2017, I've been here a year. We had the tragic events that happened with the Unite the Right rally up in Charlottesville. And that was horrible, right? And then the response from leadership at the national level was more horrible, right? But that caused some kind of water cooler conversations happen within my team that folks were wrestling with. And I told my assistant, as I always do, I said, hey, sometimes folks are going to say stuff in and around you that they might not say around me. But if you hear something you think that's important to know, that's going to impact my leadership, please let me know. And she came to me and told me about what was happening. I said, well, I'll tell you what. My last institution I worked for, a Jamaican-American brother named Gerald Hector. He's now at Morehouse College, CFO of Morehouse. And he started these cross-cultural conversations about race at our institution. And I participated, and I said, hey, I could do something similar to that here. I facilitated conversations before. So we started having conversations in August of 2017, weekly, within my division. We did that for a year, just my division. Word got out over that year with the rest of the campus. Other people wanted to get involved, so we opened up to faculty, then we opened it up to students. We opened up to other divisions, then faculty, then students. And so now we've been meeting every week, Rochelle, since then. And we've been as small as 5 because of schedules, but we've been, you know, right after the George Floyd event, we had a virtual conversation with about 160 people, right? And I think what happens is those folks who, and I tell those folks need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. They need to persist through these conversations. They need to run into and recognize difference and wrestle with that. I know that's could be life altering, because if you've walked in your whole life thinking the world was a certain way, and all of a sudden something crashes into it and you see this prism of color over here and you go, whoa, what's that? I didn't know that, right? You have to wrestle with your whole journey that you just been on and going, wait a minute, did I have some advantages or some privileges there? Those have been rich. I have learned every time, as much as I've been, you know, you've been in the game for a long time, talk about it. I love learning around people. I think that we lead and we lead people, we manage things.
Yeah.
People are what we do things for, and people are what we do. Those are the things we do with. We do stuff with people. So it seems like to me, why don't you know and understand people better, right? And then when you know and understand people better, uniquely, not stereotypes, not biases, not sound bites, not what you saw in the news. When you know and understand people, you can better understand how to work and how to lead and how to and do things with them, right? And I've been richly blessed by doing those types of things. I think I'm more effective as a leader because I continually focus on learning and understand what makes people unique. And as you and I are talking, I see a Black woman, you see a Black man, but there's so many other parts of our identity that we bring. Some we see, many we don't, right? So how do we peel that onion back to see all those forms of identity, right? So it's more than just Rochelle, the Black woman. What else is there about Rochelle that makes Rochelle who she is, right? And then the more I know about her, the better I can understand the frame of what and the context of what she's experiencing when she's going through the same halls as I am, right? I can go down a hall and go, well, the easy part is the male versus female, but what's the hard part, right? And I think we need to do that. And then I think opening the door, I really try to challenge future leaders. My conversations now, I'm trying to raise it up a little bit. Those, I'm very proud to be on the EDUCAUSE board. I'm very privileged to say that we have that CIO commitment. And I like that commitment. One of my dear friends, Ray Clemens, was the inspiration for that. And it talks about 6 things we should do. But now my focus is shifting, and I'm going to be that guy, right? 550 plus CIOs have signed it. Now my question is, what are you doing? It's one thing to say you're signing to do something, but what are you actually doing, right? So I think accountability is a big piece. If you're a leader, you should be doing something. You should be able to be what you do should be visible, seen, known, and understood. What do you believe? Do your staff know that, right? And what actions are you doing to try to improve and make things better? So for example, like for me, I've had my whole leadership team do a cultural competency program within LinkedIn Learning because we have a subscription to LinkedIn Learning. They have until the end of this month to complete it. Then we're going to have discussions. I had the next layer down do basically a 1-hour cultural competency course, right? Because I said, your supervisors and managers, you have an impact, right? Part of it is to make the world a better place right now, but part of it is to try to grow and develop their thinking as they move into leadership, right? And I'm not caring, where you come from, but I like it. This is what I believe, and I think it'll make you better. It'll make us better, and we'll make things better if we all are on the same sheet. And it is an active movement. I think you're passionate about it. I'll say this too, because I know that a lot of colleagues at senior leadership level, and I'll speak specifically about white colleagues, have never had to run into these issues for a long time.
Ever.
Yeah, and so, and ever. You're right, Rochelle, ever. And so part of it is how to socialize this with them. And I know this is just my style. I tell people not to make it a binary conversation, but I tell people I'm more Martin Luther than I am Malcolm X. I tend to try to be a kinder, gentler mode, but I have my moments when I'm like, look, this is how things should be. But I try to reserve that to when I absolutely need to do it. And I've been able to help move the needle at my current institution to get people to know and understand the challenges that people are facing and try to incorporate new ways of thinking and understanding in what they're doing, right? And getting people to bridge the gap. And then having those folks come to we call our weekly conversations intersections, have them come to intersections, especially when I have some special program. Like, I had one of the brothers on the campus, Professor Chuck Mike, he has this theater for social change. And he does it with students each semester. And, they're not accomplished actors, but they try to wrestle with challenges. And so what they were doing was wrestle with challenges on our campus with race. Mm-hmm. And so they had examples of racism dealing with what is it, to go into the cafeteria to kind of think about, Beverly Daniel Tatum's book. What is it like to be in my dormitory? What is it like to be trying to go to a fraternity or sorority? What is it like in the classroom? And so they acted out scenarios, and I saw this. He always invites me to their showing, so I went and I said, this would be great, bring it to intersections. But when I brought them into intersections, I invited cabinet, and about half the cabinet came, right? Because now they're getting access, and it's what you said, access and exposure to new information. And now, may not change them right then in the moment, but they cannot unhear or cannot unsee what they saw and heard. And you would hope that they would incorporate that into their future leadership opportunities, right? And I think that's how we move the needle. And there's other things we probably should do that are much more specific, much more targeted. I think, looking at the policies and practices we have, I know we can diversify our student body much faster than we can diversify our faculty and staff, but we should try to diversify our faculty and staff. I'll share this one story with you. I'll never forget this because I go to faculty senate all the time, right? Everywhere. One of my mentors told me, he said, you got to be connected to the academic community no matter what you're doing in higher ed. Always got to be connected. So I went to faculty senate ever since I've been in higher ed, definitely as a CIO. So I go to our faculty senate, and it's just prior to us rolling out for COVID, right? It was the last one of the physical ones. And there was one faculty member I distinctly remember who was advocating for, they're looking at diversifying the curriculum. And curriculum review is their responsibility. And one faculty was advocating for bringing in more diverse type topics and diverse programs. And so there was the typical academic discussion, I should say, argument, if you will. And then there was a conversation about diversifying the faculty. And this is what caught me off guard, right? I heard a senior faculty member who I respect, when that topic was brought up, their response was, "But we don't want to ruin our quality of our faculty." And boy, I don't get lit that often. And I know this is not my right venue. You can get where I'm going, but I look at that faculty a lot differently now, right? I was shocked to hear that. So the assumption is, right off the bat, that if we were trying to recruit Black or brown faculty, they would be less than.
Right, we're not as qualified. That's what I was telling you about my course. I'm not qualified, right? The course and the course content is perfect. Everything about it is great. I'm not qualified because I'm Black. But I want to say two things to you. One, there was an article in the Washington Post 2 or 3 years ago. A woman wrote an op-ed in there. She said, the reason why higher ed does not have more Black and brown faculty is simply because we don't want to. Period. Mm-hmm. That's all she said. She went on to extrapolate on that idea a little bit. But that's just, mm-hmm. It's a fact. It is absolutely a fact. Because if you really are intentional, you can find qualified Black, brown, and any other color person that can do this job. Mm-hmm. But if you are, lip servicing it, no, you can't diverse your faculty. And one of the things I tell universities when I go speak to them, if you're going to bring in Black and brown students, they need to have faculty and administrators and people that look like them so that when they're going through whatever struggle they have a safe place to go. And I'll give you my little short example. One of my Black students was having a problem with something that was being taught in the class he was in. He would not go to his white faculty because he was so afraid that faculty would judge him or her as being not as intelligent or smart as others. And because higher education does not understand that, it's not that student wasn't smart. It's not that student, but sometimes the way we say words and we put words together, it can be a bit dense and sometimes complex. So he needed further clarity. So to get that clarity, I think we have 5 or 6 Black faculty in my department. You have to wait to get in their line because their queue is huge. Every time there's a Black issue, they're the only people who can deal with it, right? So they're the only Black people who can address it. Plus, they also got their white students and all the other things, the books, and, you got to write or die, tenured faculty, research or die, that part, all of that part. And so that student now is left out, and so if you really are really intentional about bringing in Black and brown students, you also need to be equally intentional as bringing in Black and brown faculty. And then the last thing I'll say about something you said about the groups that you bring together for your, theater guy, affinity groups. Affinity groups are islands in the middle of a huge ocean, right? We got Black, women, Latino, Asian, all of them, gay, all of these affinity groups. Rarely do the affinity groups work with each other because they're their own thing. And then rarely do they work with the larger majority. So they depend on themselves to get through college, to get through law school, to get through graduate school. So affinity groups need to be included in these conversations because they have stories to tell that would shock you beyond belief. Because I have sat in so many of them, and I mean, even Asian affinity groups. We'll talk about, we are considered the smartest people, right? So we're paid more than white men. We are considered the best, and all this. But what we do is we get into a job and we're in that job for the rest of our lives. We may be paid fairly or paid, but in essence, our community and our opportunity for growth is limited because we have been stereotyped that this is what we can do. So math and science, you can't do any more than that. We don't have a single Native American faculty. We don't have a single Latino or Hispanic faculty. We have a few women, white women. We have a much, much smaller number of Black women and a much, much smaller of Black men. And yet and still, your student body, and I think this was produced last year, a year before last year, your student body is more than 51% diverse. Something needs to be done about that. You're the CIO, you have the vice president title, leave it to you to figure out what that is, but something needs to be done about that. We have about 5 minutes. I want to ask you 2 questions, then I'm going to give you time to say whatever else you want to say. So The question I asked you about your children. So have you had the Black parent conversation with your children when they leave the house? And I understand you have a predominantly white student and, mixed, but do you have those conversations with your children when they leave the nest?
Yes, I absolutely did. So, I was married to a Black woman, as I said, from Chicago. We had a Black son together. So we did the part-time coastal parenting type of things. But when I had him and he was coming of age, I definitely had the same conversations with him that I had with that my father had. I distinctly remember having conversations, and it was unique to him, right? I felt like, he was my firstborn, and it was something I wanted to have. I felt compelled I had to, talk about being Black and brown in America, that you're going to get judged by the color of your skin. So, this is the lot in life. Your father can't change that. This is what it is. So the sooner you understand that, the better off you're going to be. Also talked about the fact that, it's the same story, that you may do the same as a white colleague and sometimes not be seen.
Yeah.
Right. And so my advice to you is that you're going to have to, it's a lot in life. It's unfair. It's not right, but you're going to have to hustle 2-3 times harder, man, just to be seen. Right. I've also talked about how to interact in different social settings and, from police to anybody of authority. Right. I had to do the same thing with my daughter and then add more of the context. My wife has been fantastic with more of understanding the challenges women face, but I try to have my conversation as a Black father with her to say, hey, here's what's going to happen. And also, be honest with you, I said, being a biracial child, let me educate you on how, white America is going to deal with you. And let me educate you how Black America is going to think of you, right? So to be honest, Rochelle, so, she's got that kind of double whammy. And I said, you're going to have to really understand your identity and embrace your identity. And, there was challenges with that at, middle school, high school age, but eventually the confidence in who she is. And she's a beautiful woman now, and outstanding. Met her, love of her life, a Black man from Maryland. And so they've been together for, they both went to an HBCU and graduated at 15, both of them with honors, are doing fantastic as young professionals. It was interesting though, we have a weekly family Zoom chat with our kids. And I'm really impressed by my son, the 6'5" blonde hair, and how much he has learned and observed and listened and incorporated into who he is as a young man, and how much he advocates for things that are from a social and racial justice perspective. And he is soft-spoken, but lit, if you know what I mean. So when things happen, he's like, oh, hey, wait a minute, hold up, let me educate you about what's going on here, right? And I think there's power in that, right? Because, for like I said, identities, when you see him, you wouldn't know he has a Black father, right? You wouldn't know that I raised him since he was 4 years old, so he has that influence in his life. You wouldn't know that he has a Black brother and a biracial sister. but all those experiences have weighed on him and helped him to know how to have, he has a really powerful conversation because, when a white person speaks to another white person with power and understanding, I think that moves the needle in ways that sometimes people of color cannot move that needle.
Amen.
So does that make sense?
Absolutely. So the last, this yours, anything else you want to close with or anything you want to say? And as I said earlier, as soon as the video converts, I'll send you a link.
Well, there's two things. One, Rochelle, I want to thank you for your leadership on these conversations. I think these are fabulous, fantastic. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to recommend this to our campus to maybe have some conversations on our campus to help us do something similar on a smaller scale. I want to say thank you for the invitation to come and have this dialogue. It's been fun. I've really enjoyed the journey and the time went by like that. I would encourage your listeners to think about, ask yourself, how much do you know about others? And what you know about others, where'd that come from? Did that come from your parents? Did that come from the TV? Did that come from, where'd that come from? Yeah. And are you casting a net of everybody in a certain group based on a small thing, right? And look at your circle. I'm not saying this is bad or good, but if your circle is not diverse, what do you really know about people? So try to diversify your circle. Try to understand people that are different than you. Be courageous. It's going to be uncomfortable, but please get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's a term I learned from Dr. Belisa Gonzalez at Ithaca College, and she say it all the time, and I love that. And I've heard it said many times. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Don't let the fear of the unknown or not knowing somebody prevent you from a rich experience. You will come out through the process and on the other side a much better person and much better able to interact with others. Mm-hmm. And I dare say that you might come out with some beautiful friendships and relationships on the other side, right? You have just broadened your perspective on who you could have friends and relationship with, let alone all the different cultures and backgrounds and experiences you could be involved with.
That's the community. That's creating your community.
Absolutely. And so with that, I will say, become more aware, get educated, and move to be an ally, an advocate, and to be an anti-racist. And I'll stop there.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this. As soon as the link converts, I'll send it to you. And be safe and good luck and keep doing what you're doing.
You too, Rochelle. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.